Hello, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to another Art for All group. My name is Lucy, and I'm a creative artist working at St Christopher's. And today I'd like to talk to you about collage. And I've got a PowerPoint to share with you, so I'll share my screen now and tell you a bit more about what I've been making and what you might be able to make at home. So let's make this a bit bigger. So I was thinking about collage and thinking about things that we have around our home and things that we might not maybe think could be used in a certain way that can actually be reinterpreted in a way of kind of re-seeing what there is around us. And I found this quote that I really liked, that collage is the cut, the tear, the rupture and the overlay of our contemporary culture. It's the hybrid language of urbanity, remixed, recontextualised and wholly built from the fragments of daily life. Maybe it's the last bit, like the fragments of daily life, just like these tiny little bits. It doesn't have to be a whole page of a magazine, it doesn't have to be a whole word in a newspaper. It's just these small bits that mean something to us that we put into collage. And I think we can think of collage as being something that is kind of crafty and is kind of done in schools and using lots of PVA glue and getting it all over your hands. But I suppose there's the other side to collage where it's actually very anarchic, very confrontational, and also really, I suppose it uses materials that are very familiar to us to turn things on their heads. So I'm going to show you the first artist to talk about, and this, some of you may well be aware of, this is from 1912 or 1914 and it's made by Picasso, and it's the guitars, and Picasso and Georges Braque made these pieces that they called papier collé, so cutting and ripping and pasting and overlaying different textures and materials and finding a way to then work into cubism. And actually collage has been, lots of people have found their inspiration for paintings and making collages first, so the rearranging of the objects gives you a new perspective on your actual painting, and from there, from almost like making a model in the collage, people go on to do the work in the painting. And this is a really, really famous example. So this is, I guess, 40 years later. This is a really, really famous collage using magazines, making the collage into a scene rather than just an abstract piece of artwork. And I really liked it, I suppose, because we have spent so much time at home, and I love the title as well. Just what is it that makes today's home so different, so appealing? And this kind of really camp aesthetic in the photograph and this kind of playing on it as an advert. Just what is it that makes today's home so different? And it sounds a bit like some newspaper headlines you might see online. You'll never guess what so-and-so did on the beach. You'll never guess who was buying this in Sainsbury's. And just what is it? It's asking us a question. And this landscape has been created out of all these different magazines and showing this almost kind of a nightmare of the ideal lifestyle, but it's also kind of very beautiful and dreamlike as well. So I really enjoy this image. The next image is made about 10 years later, and this is from a series, and it's by the African-American artist Romara Bearden, and he made this series of images that were collages, but he then converted them into photographs, and they're showing different scenes of African-American life that are kind of placed together. And this is a street scene, but it's been brought together from scenes that aren't actually in a street, and ways of kind of, I think what you can really see with this collage is actually ways of almost being able to see more dimensions to a person than you could actually if you just had a photograph of them. And it's something that used to happen in kind of old still life paintings. You might see there might be a jug full of water, and you should be able to see just the top of the jug like that, but actually the person would have tilted it so that the perspective wasn't quite right, so that you could see more into the jug than you should be able to see from standing at that angle. But it was because they wanted people to be able to see more, that they played with the perspective so that people could see more inside, and so that they could show off more of their skill and show off more of what was inside. And maybe with showing these different angles of faces, you see kind of more of what a person is, or who a person is, and just these different angles all at once. So I like that as well. This is another 10 years on, so moving in decades, and this is an image by the punk artist Linda, and there is an exhibition of her work currently on at Kettle's Yard, in Cambridge. And if you are interested, I think there are virtual tours that you can do of Kettle's Yard, so you may be able to see some of the exhibition. So she really plays with, I think, something that we saw in the advert for Just What Is It that makes today's homes. This is kind of this brought even further on, and suddenly these cameras are almost the same size as the woman with the vacuum cleaner head, and these kind of machines are becoming people, and people are becoming machines, and they inhabit this kind of this ideal home with carpet on the ceiling. So and it's kind of playful but a bit sinister, and it's just a way of kind of, almost, I suppose it almost reminds me a little bit of children kind of making up their own monsters and stories. Kind of, the monster will have really big eyes, and it will have a big mouth, and it will look like this, and all the camera is the monster. And almost kind of, you can imagine like hands moving these things around, and kind of, the movement in it, even though it's really static. This next image, the next couple of images I'm going to show you are both images from very recent years. This is by Raquel van Haver, and she's a Colombian-born artist who works in the Netherlands. And you can see here, I don't know how many different types of media she's used, but there's photographs, there's writing, there's paint, I think there's spray paint, there's glitter, there are different bits placed in, there's some drawing as well, and also using a collage in a way, sort of something that's much more brightly coloured and painted on, more so than the other collages we've seen, but also quite symmetrical. So this almost looks kind of, it's a bit more, it's less of a scene that we're seeing, and more of a kind of this decoration and repetition, but also making meaning. And that's something that I think you can also see here. This is by Vanessa German. It's called Glory, and she's an artist based in Pennsylvania, I think, and she uses found objects a lot in her work. And this started out when she was working and she was going through difficult times financially. She was finding objects on the street and then bringing them home and making 3D sculptures out of them. So this is kind of, yes, where collage becomes 3D, and where it becomes not just paper, where it becomes these other objects that come into it as well. And I think I really, really liked a quote from her that says, a shard of glass looks worthless, but when you put those shards together, you can create an entirely new picture. And I think that's really relevant for all of us, and I think I found it very relevant for me as well. I think so often what we do, and the things we do every day, the small parts of our everyday, don't seem much when taken on their own sometimes, but actually you consider them as a whole, and they become very interesting and very important. And yeah, and that's the end of my slideshow. I will stop my screen share. And I was also going to talking about seeing collage as a way of seeing a whole. And there's actually a lot of research being done by there's an organisation called the Collage Research Network, and there are others as well. But a piece of work done by former somebody who studied at the same time as me. She's now doing research into collage as a way of treating trauma, and she's very kindly let me share some of her work today. And her name's Anila Babla, and she's been doing her dissertation was in trauma and collage as a way of working with trauma in children who'd experienced traumatic events. And I think that there are wider applications for this. So you have, in these sort of stages of making collage, you have the cutting, you have the ripping, you have the pulling things apart, which is maybe there's a reenactment of trauma there and kind of thinking about the process of that. But you also get to control what happens in it. You choose what images to take, you replace them together, and you put things back together again. So you have a shard of glass and it doesn't become the bottle that it once was, but it becomes a different kind of whole, and you get to see the different facets of things, and you get to reconsider things in a different way. So I think actually her research that stems from art psychotherapy is really relevant to collage, and means it's not just something for people who've experienced traumatic events to use, but actually relevant for all of us. And we've all been through something traumatic in lockdown, and with dealing with a global pandemic, and with each and every one of us has our individual lives and different things going on. But I think collage can be very useful for all of us, and I've had a go at making a collage, so I will show you what I have made. So I just went through the nearest magazine I had to hand, or the only magazine I had to hand, and that was a women's health magazine. I don't know why I bought it. So this is my collage, and I made it from lots of different pages. This was a cloud on an iPhone. These were parts of a coral reef, a bow, a hand, this pattern here, and this says not so hot. So maybe I'm feeling not so hot after the heat wave, or maybe this is not so hot. But yeah, this hand holding, oh, and this was the stem off an aubergine. So yeah, it became this kind of hand, two hands tying a bow, and they're giving a flower to someone, I'm not quite sure. So yeah, that. There's also, I'll lean down now, and this you can also make collage with paintings, and I'll hold this like this. So these are some hands that I was drawing and painting, and I put them on a piece of paper, and I thought it looked almost like they were playing with a ball of wool, so I drew a red thread, but they can be moved and they can be switched around. And I could play with them a bit more. So there's lots of different ways to do collage, and collage doesn't have to be stuck down either. I think I quite like collage that can be moved or has movable parts. So yeah, all you need to do for collage, you'll all be aware of it. You might want to rip, you might want to cut, you might want to fold, and all you need is a piece of paper, some glue, and some pieces that you'd be happy to use for collage. And it may be that you have photographs you might like to use. Those could be quite beautiful. It may be that you just have a newspaper. Maybe that you get a lot of catalogues through the door, and this might be what finally they have a use for. So do have a go at collage. This collage, I started off thinking that I wanted to create something that was kind of like, I thought, oh, I'll create kind of this image of the home, because that seemed to come up in a couple of the images that I shared. But in the end, I ended up with something quite different. So maybe go in with an idea, maybe stick to that, or if something else comes up, go with that. And I've kind of tucked bits in underneath other pieces and kind of made them kind of segmenting together. So you might want to give that a go as well. I also thought about using a bit of left over from when I was painting the hands, like a bit of tissue paper that I'd used my brush, dried my brush on, and I thought about popping that on there, but I didn't in the end. But that was something, another texture to add in, and yeah. So I hope you maybe have a go at this, and if you'd like to see anything else particular in an art video, then do give a message underneath this video, and I'd be happy to make an art video about anything that you're interested in. So I hope you have a good week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. All the very best. Goodbye.